Action.
Shelter's premise is basically you're in a small town, and there's one bomb shelter built in this guy's backyard, and over the course of the film 18 people ultimately show up, and the thing runs on its own recycling air system, so only 10 people can stay because that's the maximum that the air supply will allow.
So I guess the question has become, who gets to stay and who do we kill?
How do you decide whose life is more valuable, and relationship issues that happened outside, like in the case of Henry and his son. I play his son John. They've had a broken relationship, and because of this situation and the uncertainty of of life, they're forced to deal with that, and so it's kind of about redemption and families, past families, new families. There's a young girl in the shelter that's pregnant, and a little kid that is the son of the doctor and his wife. So it's a bunch of people basically thrown into a situation where they have to decide whose life is the most valuable.
Now calm down! We're gonna figure this out rationally.
Rationally? What's rational about deciding who deserves to live and who deserves to die?
We never say what the disaster is. I guess viewers can decide that for themselves. I didn't want the movie to be about the disaster. I wanted it to be about the decisions that these people are forced to make, and the situation they're in, rather than what caused the situation. So it's more about the humanity than about what it is that's happening. It's not like a big disaster film, like an Armageddon or Deep Impact or Day After Tomorrow or anything like that. It's a smaller situation, kind of like M. Night dealt with one little family in Signs. There's an alien invasion all over, and you know that it's happening globally, but it's just about this little family on the farm, and in our case it's just about this tiny little town and the people that show up at this shelter. We never say even what town this is or where it is. We keep that ambiguous too, because it's it's a situation that any of us anywhere could find ourselves in, and it's a horrible situation, but it's a real possibility. So I wanted everyone out there to be able to put themselves in that situation.
Somebody has to make some hard decisions around here.
If anything, I think we should keep Miguel around. Because the more ethnic backgrounds represented, the better, right?
We already have Maria.
And 8 white people.
It's a small town, you stupid.
Don't you dare finish that sentence. Are we giving preferential treatment to people of color now?
We shot Shelter on a format called HDV. Shelter's a low-budget film, as everybody knows, and it's basically, they call it poor man's HD, but it's still, your typical broadcast standard and movie standard HD, which is 1080i. In talking with my co-cinematographer, Juan Santos, and the director, Chris Elston, we were discussing how we could give it more of a film look, which is your typical darker shadows and background out of focus, which is your depth of field. If you see a video, you can notice the difference. Video tends to be a lot more sharper and clearer, and everything's in focus. I think it was Chris that told me that he looked into it and researched it. It's an adapter that allows you to put a film lens on it, so we could shoot with film lenses. The same lenses that they use on Panavision or whatever they're shooting major motion pictures on. So last minute, basically, we made that decision. We knew nothing about these adapters. We didn't even know how to work them really, but we rented them, hooked them up. We rolled on it very first day, and we were really happy with the look, and we've gotten a lot of compliments on the look of the film, and a lot of people can't even believe it's video. I found these other adapters that were a little cheaper, and you could own them, and I researched them online, and I called a few people up, and they swore by them. And so we had been shooting, I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks into the movie, these adapters showed up, and they looked completely different. They were much harder to use, and they just didn't give us the quality that we were looking for, and we couldn't get them to match these other adapters that we'd been renting. So we were on set. We didn't rent any that weekend, and we were dead in the water. We had no adapters. We couldn't shoot video all of a sudden because then it wouldn't match as well. And we called everyone, 2 cell phones, literally one here and one here, with 2 different rental companies. on the line, and one would put me on hold, and it was just insane. And we ended up getting the adapter that we usually rented up to that point. We ended up finding one, and we had to get the parts for the Sony because it had a specific part for the Sony camera, and we had to get that at a different place. And so we had guys at rental houses calling other guys at rental houses, and it was a big mess. But we shot the majority of this film on 2 cameras, and so most of the time we were renting 2 adapters. And then I think it was the second to last or third to last weekend, maybe even, yeah, probably third to last weekend, one of our cameras completely went down.
Ah, what the hell?
We had just shot, probably half a day, and it was done. The tape was no good. And things like this happen from a technical standpoint all the time, but a camera goes down and you realize 2 or 3 scenes you just shot 5-6 hours on are gone. People get upset, obviously. It was silent for a while. It was a really weird feeling. Everybody was pulling for us because we had, budget constraints, and this movie was very difficult to shoot with the weekend schedule constraints and all sorts of outside things going on. We didn't have a whole lot of time, and we certainly didn't have time for something like that to happen. It worked out fine. I mean, we shot on 1 camera for the remainder of the shoot. We had to adjust our schedule, but stuff like that was happening all the time. It's with a tight schedule and a low budget, you're always changing stuff. And if that's just literally ripping out storyboard pages and throwing them over your shoulder, then that's what you got to do. So I think everything unbelievable to other people happened on this film.
Yeah.
Most of it was circumstantial stuff. It just happened to show its face, technical issues on this film. And there were a lot, unfortunately. But we also had about, on average 30, 40 setups a day. I don't know if it's, Chris thought he was George Lucas or what, but no, really, there was a lot of setups, but we knew that going in, and everything was planned out as much as we could, and we scratched our heads and how can we light this in the most efficient manner where we won't have to do a lot of lighting setup times, and we could just move cameras around. It was Juan Santos. He came up with an idea of basically a massive diffuser on the roof, and we would make the whole roof light, basically. And it was the most efficient way, and it worked out great. The only problem with that, from a technical standpoint, is we had about 8 lights above that silk shooting through that to light the shelter. And if a bulb went out, you have to, tear down basically a corner or a section of that cloth, and then get on the ladder and go up and change a bulb, and you're down 20, 30 minutes with that. And I remember at the very first weekend, I bought a particular replacement bulb for our lights, and they were popping. They wouldn't even last probably 5-6 hours, and we were doing bulb changes, all weekend long. And but that got remedied too. But man, coming in, first day after a week of working, and here you are ready to do a 16, 18-hour day on shelter, and there's a bulb out at 7 in the morning is not a good way to start out your production day.